Hello and welcome to episode 39 of the FastHeartMart podcast. This episode is a little different than other episodes as I am having a computer read it for me. I chose to do this out of convenience. A lot of the time if I just wing it, or even if I read it myself, I tend to go on too many tangents and it gets too long. Also, getting the pronunciation just right requires a lot of editing on my part, as does getting the sound quality just right. Therefore, I hope you will understand why I chose to go this route. This is a very important topic in the world today, and I wanted to make sure to get my side of the story out there in the best way possible. The issue of the mRNA injections has divided the world, and I would like to try and get us all to come back together, if possible. This episode will not have any songs or a joke, as it is already 26 minutes long. Stay tuned for more jokes and songs in future episodes. Title: What to Tell the Vaccine Supremacists in Your Life When They Criticize You and the Doctors You Choose to Follow. A reason why some of us don't blindly trust the CDC, the WHO, Dr. Fauci, and Big Pharma, etc. By FastHeartMart and Stamper. Forward. This article is not meant to shame anyone for their choices on how they handled the coronavirus pandemic. I respect both sides of the aisle, whether you chose to get the mRNA injection or not. Essentially, I respect others' choices and I would like my choices to be respected. This is an article about my side of the story and why I chose the choices I did for handling the coronavirus pandemic. I sincerely want everyone to get through this storm as healthy, safe, and peaceful as possible. I have a now ex-friend on social media who loves to try and thwart my support of Dr. Peter McCullough. Let's say my ex-friend's name is John. I have to say I respect John for challenging me, but he straight up told me I'm not his friend a year ago, and now he even laughed at a post I put up of a nurse crying because she was fired from her job for refusing to get the mRNA jab. John has become a nuisance. John is someone I consider to be a vaccine supremacist because he shames anyone who does not get the mRNA injections for the C-19 virus. If I had to guess, I'd say that most of my friends chose to get the mRNA injection for the C-19 virus. However, my friends respected my choice not to get the mRNA injection, and therefore I do not consider them to be vaccine supremacists like my ex-friend John. In November of 2021, I had the pleasure of going to hear Dr. Peter McCullough in person. It was an event that was put on by my favorite group of C-19 resistors that I know, called Reopen San Diego. See link. For me, hearing Dr. Peter McCullough live was just as exciting as going to see a band that I love. I posted a photo of Dr. McCullough and I on social media the following day. In the comments section of my photo with Dr. Peter McCullough on Instagram, John challenged me in the following way. John, what's he, Dr. Peter McCullough, selling? Besides lies? He's not selling anything. He's giving truth away for free. Check out his work. John, great work getting sued by his former employer and suggesting false information. Great work with Pfizer being involved in the biggest healthcare fraud in history, owing $2.3 billion in 2009. Sorry, but being sued by his former employer does not make Dr. McCullough wrong. John, him giving false numbers about vaccines deaths does. Also on the pay from Regeneron. Why are you buying into snake oil salesmen? You really need to find his legal team. I could ask you, why are you buying into the Pfizer oil salesman? But you know why I don't? Because I am your friend and I respect your choices, whether I agree with them or not. We all make our choices, John. We could scrutinize each other forever for our choices. We could refute each other forever about how we are handling this C-19 crisis. We could bring up what we believe are true dirty facts about people we believe in forever. In the end, we all do what we find to be best for ourselves. This is why I am pro-choice. You do your thing, I'll do mine. We will never agree on everything. John, your anti-vax nonsense puts my infant child in danger. You're not a friend. Public health issues aren't sports teams, and the fact that you would even compare those two things shows how little you understand diseases or the science involved. Which is understandable. A huge thing happened and it seems scary, so why not turn to people who give easy answers during tough times? This isn't about choices, this is about you putting other people in danger by using your platform to promote falsehoods and misinformation. You've made a choice that the disease will continue to replicate and evolve. You made that choice for other people. I disagree with just about everything you just wrote, including labeling me as an anti-vaxxer. But knowing that you don't consider me a friend anymore, why would I take the time to address anything? I wish you well, John. I really do. John does not know that I studied quite a bit of biology in college, as biology was my major at one point. Although I'm not an expert biologist, I am very familiar with the complex concepts of biology and the process in which biologists reach their conclusions. Biology and science in general is never a one-sided story. Scientific experts are almost always debating. I am familiar with Dr. Gert Van den Bosch, and he believes that the mRNA injections could be complicating the pandemic. Based on Dr. Gert Van Bosch's theory, I could have told John that I believe that there is a strong possibility that it is the people who receive the mRNA injections that are the ones creating variants, making the pandemic even longer, and that's why we do not vaccinate in the middle of pandemics. The Spanish flu came and went in 2 years at a time when air travel wasn't nearly as common, so the virus had a harder time spreading. As of this writing, Earth is almost in its third year of this pandemic, and I'm not sure there's any end in sight. However, I did not want to waste my energy and time. There's only so much typing I am willing to do in the comment section of Instagram. Click here to hear Dr. Gert Van den Bosch's video warning against vaccinated during a pandemic. People want to dismiss Dr. Vanden Bosch as a veterinarian, but he is also an expert virologist and vaccinologist. John, I'm glad Jenny McCarthy and her blowing up anti-vax nonsense over autism because she's an ableist has made such a big impact on you. I did not respond to this as I have no idea what John was talking about. I just thought to myself, is Jenny McCarthy an anti-vaxxer? Has Jenny McCarthy been saying stuff about vaccines lately? Whatever, I'm not anti-vaxxer. I'm pro-choicer. John, promoting anti-vax? You made the choice to promote liars. Don't bother to address me. I don't need to hear it, as I've had this conversation about these liars plenty of times before. Hope you stay safe and healthy. Again, I did not respond. Why would I waste my energy if he's not open and he asked me not to address him anymore? Besides, I had tried calling John when the mRNA injections were first being released to the general public, as I knew he was very much in favor of getting the mRNA injection. I had wanted to talk with him about how I felt about the mRNA injections. However, John never returned my phone calls. It's a shame that the only time we were ever able to communicate about the mRNA injections was in the comments section of my Instagram posts. I think it's interesting that John uses the word promote liars. Am I promoting, or am I just sharing what I find to believe to be the best decision for myself? Were all the people on social media who took photos of themselves getting their mRNA jabs in 2021 promoting for Big Pharma? Or were they just sharing what they felt was the best choice for themselves? Also, do I have a platform? Does everybody have a platform? Did Muhammad Ali have a platform when he publicly protested the Vietnam War? And who's the liars? Is it Big Pharma that claimed the mRNA injections to prevent illness and transmission? Either way, I have to admit, I was pretty disappointed that John would say I'm not his friend anymore because I refused to take the mRNA injection. The history of John and I. John and I have been friends since 1999 when we met at a coffee shop in Albuquerque. John and I both played music at the coffee shop in Albuquerque. John was a very good friend to me, especially in the year 2000 when I had major surgery done on my heart and I almost died. John came to my house after I was released from the hospital to help me clean up my house, which was a mess because my wife at the time had not cleaned it all the whole time I was in the hospital. I will always remember that gesture of kindness that John displayed that day. Furthermore, John has made some great documentaries about me over the years. John is a very talented musician, filmmaker, podcaster, and audio engineer. Losing John's friendship was not something I took lightly, believe me. I was saddened greatly. Again, I respect John disagreeing with me, but I do not respect him throwing out our friendship and trying to bully me on my posts. However, I knew I had to stand my ground on this mRNA C19 injection issue, whether all my friends want to abandon me or not. A few months after this Instagram incident, another vaccine supremacist, now ex-friend of mine, posted something on my Facebook wall from John. Read about that fiasco here in a post of mine called Another Friend Bites the Dust. See link. Basically, I felt like I was being harassed and disrespected. These people feel at liberty to write stuff on my Facebook wall and in the comment section of my posts that they know I will not agree with, but if I did that to them they'd be furious. If I posted videos of people who have been injured by the mRNA injections on their Facebook walls, they'd be livid. I wouldn't do that because I'm not interested in forcing my choices on anyone. I don't want to scare anyone about their choices. I just want my freedom to express and celebrate my choices. I did not hear from John again until recently when I posted this blog post I wrote on Facebook called Team Invisible, where I basically question why medical facilities are still requiring masks. I'm not a total anti-masker. I'm a wear a mask when appropriate type. I'm a don't force everyone to do the same thing as it looks like tyranny type. Read that blog post to find out more. Why I think the pandemic was mishandled. Let me back up and give some context as to where I'm coming from. I was just as scared as most people when the global pandemic was declared on March 13, 2020 by someone from the World Health Organization named Tedros Adhanom. I thought we were all going to die. I bought some whiskey and prepared to quarantine myself in my apartment to await my imminent death. However, as I sat in my apartment alone, I thought to myself, I wonder if there is anything we can do to fortify our bodies against this virus. So, I jumped onto the internet, the most powerful tool common folk have ever possessed for researching. I say this half jokingly, and went searching for ways to fortify my body against the C19 virus. As I searched, I found that doctors, nurses, people were recommending the same things that are recommended for the flu, such as sunshine, vitamin D, zinc, exercise, diet low in processed sugar, avoid alcohol, etc. I also discovered doctors such as Dr. Pierre Corey, who was having good results treating patients with COVID using ivermectin and other drugs. I thought to myself, why isn't anyone in the mainstream media talking about all the things they can do to prevent getting seriously ill from COVID? Why aren't these doctors I am finding all over the news in an effort to help people take care of themselves? I even made my own list and shared it on Facebook in an effort to inform people what they could be doing to help themselves. Check out my very scattered list here. See link. Essentially, I was very proactive in taking care of myself throughout the pandemic with the use of vitamin D, zinc, quercetin, exercise, sunshine, low sugar diet, etc. Well, then the topic was switched to Black Lives Matter in June 2020 after George Floyd was killed by a police officer. Everyone became fixated on racism in the world. Suddenly, no one wanted to hear what I had to say about the virus anymore. I think most of the people who protested for BLM had good intentions. I think it was a terrible thing that happened to George Floyd. I would love to help black communities and stop police brutality in the USA. However, I found it odd that the George Floyd story seemed to overshadow the pandemic we were supposedly living through. Then the BLM protests took a backseat to the presidential election of 2020, all the while a virus was supposed to be killing an inordinate amount of people. That's when I knew I had been fooled. If this virus were really as deadly as most of us had feared in the beginning, then we would not have been so easily distracted by the George Floyd incident or the presidential election of 2020. If the virus was as deadly as most of us had feared, a huge percentage of us would have been dead within a month or two, but the death toll never went above 1% as far as I knew. If this virus were really as deadly as most of us feared, I think a huge percentage of us would have been dead back in November of 2019, long before the WHO had declared the pandemic. If this virus were really as deadly as most of us had feared in the beginning, we would have been doing anything we could do to prevent ourselves from getting sick from it, including vitamin D, zinc, sunshine, exercise, ivermectin, whatever. However, we were all busy squabbling over who would be the next president and how do we end racism in the world. It became apparent to me that we were being manipulated into fighting with each other. Furthermore, I had the feeling that they wanted us all to sit on our hands and wait for a vaccine to come out. Just as I had realized I had been fooled by the global pandemic, Donald Trump was announcing that he was warp speeding a vaccine for the deadly virus known as coronavirus 19. What? I said to myself, people aren't really gonna fall for that, right? At least all my Donald Trump hating friends won't take a vaccine that was warp speeded by Donald Trump, will they? What about Dr. Pierre Corey? He and his network of doctors are treating patients for COVID with ivermectin and other things. They even have a website for people to visit. That's when I became aware of something called emergency use authorization. Side note, for those of you still skeptical of ivermectin and believing it's a horse medication, I invite you to check out the following links. Emergency use authorization and why doctors were silenced. As far as I understand it, emergency use authorization is when a drug company is allowed to release a drug to the public before it's gone through full testing. As far as I understand it, in the case of vaccines, full testing can take 5 to 10 years. However, if there is an emergency health crisis that has no known treatments, then drug companies can release a drug before it has gone through its full testing. Bingo. That's why the media was not letting doctors like Dr. Pierre Corey's findings reach the public. If the government or the citizens knew there were definite treatments for COVID, then the drug companies would not be allowed to release Donald Trump's warp speed MAGA jab. And who sponsors all the mainstream media? The drug companies. Not just any drug companies, but the drug companies we now know make up Big Pharma, such as Pfizer. See link. Why do we use the term Big Pharma? What does Big Pharma mean? To me, it means the drug companies that value monetary profit over true public health. I'm sure there is still much legitimate work being done by scientists in the pharmaceutical industry, and I do not want to dishonor those scientists. Therefore, I use the term Big Pharma to distinguish Good Pharma versus Big Pharma. Big Pharma will not profit nearly enough off a drug as old as ivermectin. Big Pharma will only profit off of new drugs that have no generic manufacturers. Big Pharma sponsors all the news channels, see video, so they can control what information the news channels report on. In the case of the coronavirus pandemic, Big Pharma stifled any doctors that were treating COVID with existing drugs because Big Pharma was looking to sell its new vaccine to save the day. At the end of 2020, Trump lost the presidential election and Joe Biden was declared the winner by the mainstream media. The same mainstream media that was funded by Big Pharma. Usually the United States government declares the winner of elections, but apparently now the mainstream media has been handed the task. Then on Jan 6, 2021, Donald Trump threw all his supporters under the bus in a display to show the world not to protest your government or else you will look like those Donald Trump supporters. I had a feeling that there would be an ambush on all those dear MAGA people, but I thought it was going to be a physical ambush, not an ambush on their image. Although, I think there was a lot of manipulation to unpack that took place at the January 6th protest. I think the whole thing ruined Trump's reputation once and for all. Side note, I'm not anti-Trump or pro-Trump. I am pro-individual standing up for what they believe in. I think most of the MAGA people are excellent people. I think Donald Trump did some great things for the USA and he did not deserve a lot of the hatred he received while in office. However, I can understand why so many people did not like him as well. That's all I'll say here. Then, in early 2021, Joe Biden was ushered into presidency. Most of the people who voted for Biden really wanted Bernie Sanders to win, but they were okay with Biden because he was not Trump. Then, also in early 2021, all the people who said in the summer of 2020 that they would never take a vaccine put out by Donald Trump started taking Donald Trump's MAGA jab, claiming Trump had nothing to do with it. They denied that Trump pressured the FDA so much that the vaccine came out in record speed. The people taking the jabs posted photos of themselves taking the jabs all over social media. Hallelujah. The war is over, it seemed they were saying. Donald Trump, The Wicked Witch is dead, and now we have the antidote to the C-19 virus, and we can all live happily ever after. People's hate for Trump was so bad that now you were considered a Trump supporter if you did not take the MAGA jab. I think my friend John could be described as Trump hater, and some of his disdain for people not taking the MAGA jab was because of John's hate for Donald Trump and the Donald Trump supporters. It was truly one of the most bizarre situations I'd ever witnessed in my life. Friends who have described themselves as anti-vax for years were getting on board with the warp speed MAGA jabs. Furthermore, the Trump supporters were still supporting Trump even though a lot of them were against the mRNA injections. What the heck is going on? I'm not taking the vaccine, I told all my friends in person and on social media. It's not even a vaccine. It's genetic modification, I said. I even posted a photo of myself taking the vaccine for April Fool's Day 2021. However, it was only a green screen shot that I had manipulated to look like I was in a medical facility getting my warp speed MAGA jab. See the post on Instagram at this link. In spring of 2021, my friends would say, well, you don't have to take the vaccine if you don't want to. Then by summer of 2021, when they realized the vaccine does not keep them from getting sick or from spreading C-19, they started saying at least I did not get as sick as I would have if I didn't get the vaccine. People should be mandated to take this vaccine because they are getting sick and filling up the hospitals. People have to get vaccinated for their schools and jobs all the time. In the summer of 2021, people started losing their jobs for refusing the mRNA injection. The whole thing became a huge mess like so many of us had predicted. Again, I realized this wasn't about public health. This was a big scheme for the rich to get richer at all costs, including sacrificing people's livelihoods. If this were about public health, the narrative would have been, scientists have developed a vaccine for the C-19 virus. It utilizes a new technology and it was warp speeded, but we think most people should take it. However, please do not shame anyone who does not want to take it, as they have a right to be skeptical. Instead, the message that all the public officials were saying was essentially, science has created a miracle vaccine for the C-19 virus, and if you do not take it, you are to be shamed and lose your job. Period. That's not public health. That's an ad for Big Pharma. Side note, this is a topic for another article, but if we are to have effective leaders in these times, we need someone who will always give their opposition an exit strategy. In this example, Joe Biden would have said to the people who oppose his strong push to get vaccinated with a simple, if you do not want to take it, that is your right to be skeptical. If he would have just said that, he would not have alienated so many people. Instead, he said in winter 2021, it's going to be a long winter of severe illness and death for the unvaccinated, and we all know that was not true. I soon came upon a video of Dr. Peter McCullough, who was testifying before the Texas Senate in March 2021, that he was having success treating COVID until he was silenced. See video link. In this video you will hear Dr. Peter McCullough talk about what some of us already knew for 9 months, that doctors who were treating patients for C-19 were being silenced. Dr. Peter McCullough also states, at about 14 minutes in, that asymptomatic spread is not a driver of outbreaks. Side note, Dr. Fauci is on video here saying the same thing, asymptomatic transmission is not the driver of outbreaks. Essentially, Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Pierre Corey, and other doctors were validating what my intuition was already telling me. Isn't that the human condition? We follow those who resonate with our own intuition. If we are lost in the woods, do we not use our intuition to try and get out? If we meet up with 2 other people while trying to get out, do we team up with the person who has the same intuition as us to get out? Or do we team up with the person who has a completely different idea on how to get out of the woods that does not resonate with our intuition? Do we let a mass of people pressure us into following the person who does not resonate with our intuition? Team Invisible. Fast forward to December 2022 and I put up a post on Facebook entitled Team Invisible. The mask debate continues in medical facilities. See link. Which was me essentially telling my story of challenging my doctor for forcing me to wear a mask in her office even though I was there for my eye, not a respiratory virus. I knew the post would be controversial, but I feel it is my duty to speak out in these times or else the world may become North Korea everywhere. Well, my ex-friend John latched onto the fact that I brought up Dr. Peter McCullough and left this comment saying, I'm sure Bruce is enjoying his tour, making money in retirement. John left this link from a publication called Examiner Enterprise that essentially claims that everything Dr. Peter McCullough is saying has been debunked by the CDC. Furthermore, the article claims that Dr. Peter McCullough is being political in his talks to the public because he is encouraging the audiences to stand up for their medical freedom while they still can. I should have added that when I went to hear Dr. Peter McCullough in person, he was pretty critical of Trump and his MAGA jabs, but the ExaminerEnterprise.com article does not mention that. I should have simply replied to John with, you already told me a year ago that you don't want me to address you on this issue anymore, so I'm going to respect your wishes. However, I could not help myself and I simply responded with fact check. His name is Peter, not Bruce, and you're believing the side of of the story that Big Pharma wants you to believe. I had every intention at leaving it at that, as I know where these debates go in the comment sections of social media. However, John came back at me again. John, and you're aligning with fascists? So good job there, said John. You know, the men's right guy who interviews transphobes and other garbage of the like. John continued and left another link to an article. See link from a site called healthfeedback.org, which essentially lists all the misinformation that Dr. Peter McCullough said on the Joe Rogan podcast back in December of 2021. John, if you're going to spread misinformation, at least get paid like the people you reference. Don't be a sucker, said John, fueling the fire. Now I was pissed. Calling Joe Rogan a transphobe and a fascist really got under my skin. It's not true, and people have to stand up to this misinformation and lies. I thought to myself, here he is accusing me of spreading misinformation, but he's the one spreading misinformation. As a full-time traveling musician, I've had the luxury of listening to hours upon hours of the Joe Rogan podcast. I believe Joe Rogan is one of the most positive forces we have in media today, and I was not going to let John slam him that easily. As I'm writing this, I have had plenty of time to think of the most concise response I could have shut him down with. I should have simply responded with Big Pharma is the fascists, and you are their unknowing minion going around trying to silence heroic doctors such as Dr. Peter McCullough. Pfizer has a long track history of fraud, yet you blindly defend them every chance you get. Good luck with that. However, I was not calm enough to respond so eloquently. If you're going to share your disinformation from your blue anon, vaccine supremacist, World Health Organization loving echo chamber, make sure you at least know both sides of the story first, I responded. Fascist defined in Webster's, a political philosophy, movement, or regime such as that of the fascisti that exalts nation and often race above the individual, and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition. Stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition, I repeated. That sounds like you, especially that last part, but I continue with my rant. Do I exalt nation and race above the individual? No, I'm not the one going around forcing individuals to do things that goes against their intuition and better judgment for the good of the community, state, nation, world, whatever you want to call it. I said, do I stand for a centralized autocratic government? Examples: World Health Organization, World Economic Forum headed by a dictatorial leader. Examples: Joe Biden, Dr. Fauci, Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, Albert Bourla, CNN, Fox News, Big Tech, Big Pharma, Big Oil, Big Banks, etc. Severe economic. Examples: freezing bank accounts such as Kanye West, BitChute, the Canadian truckers, etc. and social regimentation. Example: cancel culture and forcible suppression of opposition. Taking away the individual known as Dr. Peter McCullough's medical license, livelihood, removed from Twitter, and not one doctor will debate him in public. I asked John, no, I'm not for any of that stuff at all. I answered my own question. I'm not even sure why they're still on here. I continue my rant. You unfriended me a year ago for refusing to go out and get an mRNA jab that we all know now does not prevent infection or transmission. I continued ranting. Why would I waste my time debating you in the comments section on all your non sequiturs, when I know you will not change your stance even when all the facts you believe in today are disproven tomorrow? Take this mRNA injection or else you're going to get infected and transmit this disease. I kept going. I'm sure you did not listen to this Dr. Peter McCullough interview, as you have canceled Joe Rogan just as you cancel everyone else who does not support your views. Forcible suppression of opposition, severe economic and social regimentation. I did listen to every second of the interview you are citing, and I found it very informative, I stated. I kept going with, I think it's pretty weak that you'd cite an article about a podcast that you refused to listen to. Just as I'm sure you will refuse to read an article that I write about Dr. Peter McCullough. I continue my rant with, for anyone who is interested in hearing both sides of this story that I have been following since before most people even knew who Dr. Peter McCullough is. Within this week, I will write up an article explaining this whole mess of Dr. Peter McCullough's story, so at least both sides of the story are presented. Everyone else who may be reading this, stay tuned for my write-up of Dr. Peter McCullough's story, written by me, an individual, with no interest in anything but in finding the truth for myself and weighing in on both sides of the story in the process. I wish I had time to tell the story right now, but I have to go earn a living. I will say this, a big part of the story involves emergency use authorization, and I left it at that for a week. The Team Invisible follow-up. A week later, I told John the following: John, I'm still working on my article about Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm pretty excited about it, but I just haven't had enough time yet to complete it, with the holidays and all my gigs. I'm a full-time musician and the holidays get crazy with gigs. In the meantime, I will tell you what I told you last year when you started talking crap about Dr. Peter McCullough. See link, which is if you want to believe in Pfizer, a company that was found guilty in the biggest health fraud in history. See link, over doctors like Dr. Peter McCullough. That is your right, and I will respect your choice, even though you clearly do not respect my choice. If you want to believe in the Examiner and Teprise.com article you sent me, who repeatedly cites the CDC in its article against Dr. McCullough, then that is your right, even though the CDC has been wrong many times over the years, including many things during this current pandemic. See link, Furthermore, how many times has Rochelle Walensky, the spokeswoman for the CDC, been wrong? Me, if you want to believe in the World Health Organization, who owns the healthfeedback.org article you shared and is fronted by Tedros Adhanom, a man that many throughout the world believe should be tried for crimes against humanity. See link. And that is also your right. Me, if you want to believe in Dr. Fauci, who many believe should also be tried for crimes against humanity as well. See link. That is your right too. Me, you are quick to cancel someone like Joe Rogan because you say he represents men's rights. What's wrong with men's rights? And transphobic because Joe Rogan thinks it's unfair for biological men to compete against biological women in sports, even though Joe Rogan has interviewed transsexuals on his podcast, such as Kristen Beck. See link. Me, however, you are not willing to cancel any of the figures I mentioned above who have probably committed crimes against humanity. Doesn't make sense to me, but hey, that's still your right. Believe what you want to believe, John, and I'll do the same. Me, until then, merry holidays and stay tuned for my full article on Dr. Peter McCullough, written by me, a man who is funded by no one. I should have mentioned something about the CDC, the WHO, and in Big Pharma not having faces, unless you want to say Dr. Fauci, Rochelle Walensky, Tedros Adhanom, and Albert Bourla represent these entities. If these people represent these agencies, then shouldn't we be addressing them just like the mainstream media addresses Dr. Peter McCullough? Is it fair to attack an individual, such as Dr. Peter McCullough, with data from faceless agencies such as the CDC, the WHO, etc.? Please see Dr. Peter McCullough's website here for accurate information of his side of the story. See link. Also, check out this video of the top White House COVID advisor admitting that there is no study in the world that proves that masks work. See link. John responded with, "This shit is hilarious, dude. So much work to deny reality." I think John blocked me after his responses. I cannot respond to him anymore. I just wrote, "I think it's hilarious that I cannot respond to John anymore," and left a link to this great Substack article about Pfizer's history of fraud. See link. What to tell the vaccine supremacists in your life when they criticize you and the doctors you follow. To put it simply, just tell them that the CDC, the WHO, Dr. Fauci, and Big Pharma are not to be trusted blindly. If they accuse you of aligning with fascists, tell them you could accuse them of the same for blindly believing in the CDC, the WHO, Dr. Fauci, and Big Pharma. If they want to go further down the rabbit hole, roll up your sleeves and share some of the links in this article. In my experience, they will ignore all of your info and go run and hide in their hole. If they do not run and hide, they may actually be someone you want to keep in your life and have respectful debates with. After all, respectful debates are what makes science great. I actually have a type of respect for John that I do not have for all my friends who have unfollowed me and not even tried to debate me. Instead, they just slink away from me without mention. I believe respectful debates, where we can find common ground, are going to get us out of this dark time, but that is a subject for another article. Note, I do not consider the mRNA injections to be vaccines as they do not meet the classic definition of a vaccine, and the definition changed after the release of the mRNA injections. However, I use the term vaccine supremacist out of convenience. I'd rather say mRNA supremacist, but I think it'd get lost in translation. Note, Anomaly is the first person I heard use the term vaccine supremacist. I think he coined the term. Check him out for great analysis of the world's current events. See link. Note, as far as I know, James Evan Pilato coined the term MAGA jab. Check out his great work at MediaMonarchy.com. His philosophy is don't hate the media, become the media. My name is FastHeartMart Stamper. I am a musical adventurer, writer, and medical freedomist based in San Diego, California. Thanks for reading and or listening.